Test, 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 test. Alright, hello second channel. Sorry about a fox you may be able to hear screaming. Is there any worse sound in the world than a fox screaming its head off? I don't think there is. But yeah, gonna unprivate the stream quick. But yeah, today it's the big one. You've been waiting for it. Been waiting for it for ages. It's my Afghanistan stream, finally. Yeah, much requested. I was meant to do it on Monday, but I went for a nap after returning home. You guys might have obviously seen I had a different set last week. But yeah, returned home and then unpacked all my stuff. Thought, have a little nap. Ended up sleeping for like 5 hours. Oh, I think I was really tired. Alright, let's just share this around. I've got plenty to talk about. Okay. Finally giving... Finally giving my based take on Afghanistan. Live streaming now. Alright, here we go. That reminds me. Need to get out one more link. Alright, stick this on my Discord. But yeah, hopefully do about an hour and a half. We'll see how the conversation goes. This is going to be one of the ones where I talk a lot more than read the chat. Which hopefully you guys are alright with for this one. Giving my take on Taliban, but he was right. Alright. All sounds good to me. We will take some comments to start with, though, while I wait for people. I don't want to repeat myself a million times. But yeah, if you're in the chat already, leave a like on the video. Leave a comment if you want to start talking. Just going to get one more article up that I want to read from. June 4th? Damn. Haven't read anything on Medium in a long time. But there is an article I want to read about. You guys sometimes like my media takes, so... Ooh. I feel like crap though. Still having side effects after 6 days from you know what. I dare not say it on YouTube because it's so easy to get a load of shit. Alright, my resolution is bad. Why is the resolution bad? Alright, it says it's fine. Everything seems good. Alright. And of course the foxes have started up again. But hopefully I can make it quiet enough that you guys won't hear it. Alright, so this is alright. So someone in the chat, Kid Yes, thinks I fell off. Well, I'd hate to break it to you, Kid Yes. I think I had my best month ever, actually. I had most subs ever, most ad revenue ever, most views ever in a 4-week period. So yeah, I didn't fall off. I literally had my best my best 4-week period in the history of myself doing YouTube. So I mean, you can make yourself feel better by saying that, but go have a look at my analytics on Social Blade if you want. Sorry, if you guys can hear this fox, I'm going to turn my mic down a bit. Hopefully you guys won't hear it as much. I'm just going to be quiet and listen to the foxes. That is very annoying. Okay, you can't hear them as much when I turn it down a lot. I'm going to speak near the mic for now. So, all right. You shouldn't really be able to hear the foxes now. I'm hoping. When they stop squeaking so much or screaming, I'm gonna go back over here. So I'm just putting some music on for myself to listen to while I talk. I always like doing that. Alright, I found a new artist I like lately, so let's just stick that on. Right. Hey everyone, thanks for joining. Poe Posterous, good evening, good vibes to everyone. Thanks for joining. Hi Katie. Hey folks, Under Tornado. Watch. So glad for the distraction. Oh damn. So what's happening where you are? In capitalism, having your best month ever is still failure. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I guess so. Some news about Afghanistan. Tahaka. Oh, hey, Tahaka. I haven't spoken to you in a while. Hi, Limbo. I'm gonna watch this while I do modern history. Are you studying, Limbo? The max quality is only 360p. Yeah, I saw that in my settings. Let me see how this actually looks. Damn, that looks like shit. And is that the max? Yeah, sorry about this. I don't know if I'll be able to change it on the fly. But yeah, has told me, wait. Stream health. Analytics, stream settings. Does anyone... okay, sorry guys. YouTube streaming. How to change from 360p. Yeah, sorry about that. All right, so sorry if it's bad for people at the moment. If it gets better, please let me know. If it gets worse, then I don't think I can help you. But you guys, okay, it looks like shit. That's fair enough. Let's hope that it doesn't detract too much from everything. I'm just gonna refresh the page quick. I don't really want to mess with anything. Yeah, I'm trying to see what the deal is. So it's telling me it's bad. Yeah, I don't know how to change it. I'm a bit of a noob at this shit. So recording. Yeah, my OBS is fine. It seems like it's a problem with YouTube specifically. Why morning? Sorry, I will get to people's questions and chats and stuff. Just trying to see if I can mess around with this a bit more. Alright. Yeah, it's only giving me 2 options, I'm afraid. How do I use a... Does anyone know how you change the actual streaming rate? Because it's giving me a suggestion, but I'm like, how the fuck do I change it? So I've been asking in the... How do I change YouTube stream? Okay. Alright. Don't know what's going to happen. Wait, I'm going to take more comments. Sorry, I'm just having a little research over how to improve this. I did notice my last live stream looked kind of shitty as well, which isn't great. Alright, sorry, just one sec. Did it look good at all if I go back to the start of the stream? It never looked good, the stream, which is annoying. Hopefully you guys are watching on your phone or anything or something. Hey Black Panther, thanks for joining. Sup Cav, hi one produced. Big fan of your content. Thank you for saying so, Grumpy Gaming. Writing my assignment on Australian civil rights. That's interesting. Is that about Aboriginal rights, Limbo, or anything to do with Irish as well? Kate saying a tornado warning, which just ended here, is when a tornado rotation is spotted on the radar, but a tornado watch is like it could happen. That's so crazy. That's why I would never want to live in America, just with obviously like global warming making it worse. There's just so much crap like that, like so much natural disasters that can potentially happen. Do you have like a shelter or like a bunker or something? Okay, you just go on say, got my guinea pigs into a carrier and pulled a sofa cushion over my head in the bathtub. Second story apartment, not much to do. So do most people not have like a shelter or anything? The quality is fine enough to see your Sigma male looks. Great. I'm happy about that. Yeah, OBS doesn't seem to be the problem. Hey Gav, what leftist ideology do you subscribe to mostly? People ask me this a lot. I'd probably just say leftist, anti-capitalist. I don't really subscribe to any one ideology. Like, you can call me like colloquially as like a socialist and stuff. I am like left wing, like very much so, but you know, communism I like enough. But then I've spoken about this a lot. Just my own problems with humanity, kind of I'd say stop me from becoming completely one. Well, you give me recommendations, YouTube, and I don't know how to do them. So I'll fuck around with that after the stream, see if we can fix it. How's it going? Hi, Bad Burrito. Nerdrotic. Yeah, I've heard of them, but just haven't watched much of their stuff. Phone 330, 360p gang, yeah. No love for Spooky Kitty. Did you comment? Oh, you did comment. Hi, Spooky Kitty. Hi, Rancedy. Hi, Red Leader. Thanks for joining. Katie saying, if you live in a tornado alley, most houses have a basement, but I am by the Mason-Dixon line, so we get them every so often. But if you... okay, you're screwed, basically, if you live in an apartment. That sucks. But hopefully, yeah, no tornado comes your way. 69 viewers. It's already gone up already. Alright, just get my own Twitter up myself. Alright, let's just hope the stream health improves. I don't know if it's like a Wi-Fi thing. Who actually knows at this point? But yeah, so I want to talk about this a lot. I might make my video tomorrow about right-wingers agreeing with the Taliban. But I just want to talk about Afghanistan because obviously it's very frustrating just watching the discourse around Afghanistan, just generally. Oh yeah, it's demon time, Esther, for sure. Oh yeah, okay, I think I want to talk about this quick. Alright. In the chat right now, if you know what demon time is, put F in the chat. Because right now, we're on UK demon time. Put F in the chat, guys. The fuckboys are out. The demon time post had me dying. Yeah, my friend sent me it on Friday. I'd never heard of it before. And then I just kept talking about it on Saturday. We were at like me and my girlfriend were having like a little thing in her garden. Just kept talking about fucking demon time. Okay, most of you fucking know. Why do you guys all know what demon time is? For those of you who don't know, I'm gonna put it up for you here. Let me see, you guys can see it properly. Alright, so according to Urban Dictionary, demon time, any time of the night past 11 PM, a time of pure fuckery when the fuckboys come out to play. People's feelings are not taken into account. I just fucking love it. A time of pure fuckery What? Who the fuck talks like this? Love it. This is something I want to go through as well. This is my own article. Time of pure fuckery. That's what it is right now. Pure fuckery. Feelings are not going to be taken into account on a Demon Time stream. Those are true Demon Time goggles, my dude. Yeah, exactly. Because it's fire. Diego, I already talked about that. Yeah, I don't know who that is really. I've seen a couple of his videos. Why were you in jail dressed like a cyberpunk character in your community post? Jail? I wasn't in jail. I was outside in the garden. I guess it. Okay. I guess we're talking about this. One sec. I'll get out. After a long day of the Sigma grind, you need to just be active in Demon Time. It's always a crossover though. Demon Time, Sigma grind. It always just blends into one. Yeah, on Demon Time you can only go for 360p. I honestly don't fucking know why it's on 360p, but yeah. So apparently, I don't know why people think I'm in prison. I'm just in a garden. That's a wall behind me, I guess. I always find it funny how many likes pictures of myself get. Like, that's got 750, and then I thought this post was fucking hilarious about Adam Smith. Because me and my girlfriend we're just walking through Edinburgh, and we literally just bump into this statue of Adam Smith, and then people get a bit mad in the comments and said, met the guy who's responsible for all our problems. I'm of course fucking joking. He is like the father of modern capitalism, but like I know he's not like well, I wouldn't say based, but I think a lot of capitalists wouldn't like Adam Smith today, if they know anything about him. Please check resolution. How the fuck am I meant to know what the resolution is? Right, sorry. Alright, I'm having a look at properties. Resolution. Yeah, I don't know if it's something to do with my OnlyFans. OnlyFans, I just said. OBS. Why did I say OnlyFans? Does anyone want to go on my OnlyFans? Speaking of OnlyFans, I read this on Twitter the other day. Is OnlyFans getting rid of the not safe for work stuff? Or is that just like a myth or something? Like they were saying it's like Tumblr, how Tumblr allowed all this like nude stuff on it and made it really popular. And then they just got rid of it all. I don't know if that's actually a thing that's happening though. It sounds fucking crazy if it is. Alright, I'm a bit annoyed about the resolution because I wanted to use some of my stream for tomorrow's video. I guess we're just going to have to talk about the same shit all over again. OnlyFans is making a new app that is safe for work. It's going to be separate. Oh, okay. That just sounds pointless as well. Like, you already have Patreon, but can't you? Isn't OnlyFans whatever you want though? Like not safe for work or safe for work anyway. Rebrand, but I don't think they're dropping it. Oh, okay. Oh, okay. All right. So I was reading some stuff up. 144p is true doing time. Yeah, exactly. All right. So we've got nearly 100 people here, which is good. Even though the stream looks like total fucking garbage. Let me just look at it on my phone quick to see if it's adequate. Then we're going to talk on Demon Time, we're going to talk about Afghan. All right. Let's see here. On my phone, it looks fine. Alright, it's a time of pure fuckery. It's demon time. Let's fucking get started about Afghan. So, yeah, basically the whole thing of Afghanistan, what frustrates me, and I'm not being like an elitist or some shit, but you guys will probably know, if you subscribe to me for a long time, my educational background is in like, well, a lot of it is in Middle Eastern stuff, war on terror stuff. I know Afghan technically isn't in the Middle East, but we sometimes just lump it in with that because of like Al Qaeda operating in there and stuff like that. Anyway, a lot of the stuff has been very frustrating to listen to, just because of like, what's the word I'm looking for? The morals of America being there in the first place, right? And talking about the moral high ground they may have on this stuff, and just like to criticizing Biden for leaving is just the strangest one, because people were so on board for it when it was Donald Trump, but now it's Biden. People fucking hate it, apparently. The one thing I will say, it seems to be getting a bit better now, is, okay, apparently intelligence services didn't know how quickly the Afghan army would fold. The only thing I'd say is that America historically, in terms of Afghanistan specifically, have been really bad at letting interpreters go to America. So the one big criticism I have is, surely some sort of more robust networking thing should have been set up to allow interpreters and people who'd worked with the US military to leave the country and get to America. And apparently, I was reading stories last night about how loads of them were told in their applications, this is like a couple of years ago, that even though they had worked for the coalition, there was still like things in their past, often rubbish things, like didn't really affect things. Things about like they couldn't be trusted, they'd still pose a security threat and stuff like that. L'Empire Galactique, you haven't missed anything, I've just started. Anyway, so my one big criticism is that a lot of people should have been evacuated before. And because I also did a lot of my history degree on Vietnam, the parallels are a bit ridiculous in the sense that, like, okay, let's before people want to, I'll address this from like the start of this stream, right? So people like to compare Afghanistan with Vietnam, and I think the comparisons go as follows in terms of the Afghan army didn't really have the stomach for the fight or the popular support of the people, especially as much as you think they did. Like, people like to frame it as like, well, surely the locals loved the Afghan army. They didn't love the Afghan army. It's and people the most ridiculous shit I've seen is people saying 85% of Afghans don't like the Taliban, right? And even as something like, if anyone understands how polling works, you don't normally give someone a binary option, right? So I was even suspect of that stat going around, because I'd say like, people saying that, the only thing I could imagine is if there was a poll done, it would be 85% of Afghans don't have a positive opinion of the Taliban, not that 85% oppose the Taliban. That is way too high. And as you would know it, I looked into this massive report, which was like 400 pages long, looked at the methodology, and it actually turned out I was right, that it wasn't 85% oppose the Taliban. It was like 13% have a positive view of the Taliban. But also, I'm really skeptical of that study anyway, because how could you get an accurate sample size? Because Afghanistan is a very diverse country, but unlike a lot of countries, let's say like the UK, for example, a lot of the diversity is located regionally, and especially in places that are controlled by the Taliban. How are you going to get accurate poll results? So that's one thing. That was pretty ridiculous to say, like, oh, 85% of Afghans hate the Taliban. That's just simply not true. Something like that can't survive for as long as they can without support, right? Where do they get their fighters from? Where do they get their food and supplies from? Even if you say, like, oh, they're funded by helped and funded by the Pakistani Taliban at times, even though they don't really like each other, a lot of them, or like the Pakistan intelligence service. Anyway, polling for Afghanistan being an accurate indicator of anything is just pretty fucking ridiculous. I don't think it's a good indicator of anything. But in terms of Vietnam, the armies were similar, but the South Vietnamese army was significantly better than the Afghan army. Significantly better, especially by 1972, when 1973 when the US pulled out. Also better equipped, I'd say, as well. And also the ridiculous notion, right? The fall of Saigon was a good thing. And it might be controversial for some Americans to hear, but the fall of Saigon historically is a good thing, right? It's getting rid of this corrupt, Eurocentric South Vietnamese government that did not respect the rights of religious majorities. And they were the religious minority, a lot of them, because they were Catholics. Most of them. It was a military dictatorship. It was widely despised by the people. People need to remember with Vietnam is that while the North, invaded massively the South in 1974-5, or was it just 1975? I forget. It was also a massive popular war in South Vietnam. The NLF, which you guys know as a Viet Cong, very, very popular. So it was a southern insurgency which was aided by the North. The North didn't actually invade properly until the last year of the war, while they tried some attacks during the Tet Offensive. There was a Tet Offensive in 1969 as well. There's various other offensives in the early 1970s. And this resulted in loads of casualties for the North Vietnamese because they're essentially trying to go toe-to-toe with the South Vietnamese. So, that's one thing, right? So, the fall of Saigon, good thing. Will of most of Vietnam. If America had just done what they promised and gave Ho Chi Minh, his leadership position, which they promised him, then we wouldn't have had all that horrible bloodshed. But the fall of Kabul is obviously not a good thing. In my opinion, I don't want the Taliban to rule Afghanistan, but we seem to have a binary opinion, and I do laugh at it. The country that says the fall of Saigon is a bad thing and saying the fall of Kabul is like a bad thing as well. Here's something that people need to understand about Afghanistan, right? So if we take this back to the Soviet Union, right? So here is a government with the communist government of Afghanistan. This is before the Soviets invaded. The communist government of Afghanistan faced a massive backlash because it did introduce, as communists do, more progressive reforms, especially around women workers and women's rights in general, right? This is something the communist government did. And this faced a massive backlash in Afghanistan, which has a lot of, as you see with groups like the Taliban, a conservative area. Saigon is in South Vietnam. It's called Ho Chi Minh City now. So part of the Soviet war, obviously I'm under no illusions for a lot of it that the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan wasn't because the Soviets were like, we must protect women's rights, or, that might have factored in a tiny bit. It's mainly about, this Cold War battle against the United States, right? But if, here's the thing, if the United States cared about women's rights ever, then why are you giving Islamist insurgents state-of-the-art weaponry to fight the Soviets? Again, the US have never cared about women's rights in Afghanistan. Now, most of the people who made up the leadership of the new Afghanistan government after the fall of the Taliban in 2001, these guys were warlords, they were brothers of warlords. Many warlords made up the government. These warlords had also fought the Soviets, and they just didn't like the Taliban, because the Taliban were this political Islamist movement following, the fall of the communist government. I think it fell properly in 1992. The Taliban, the ones who won the civil war. Now, the Taliban, they have a different versions. It's the Pakistani Taliban as well, but it's like a Pashtun, which is one ethnicity in Afghanistan, Sunni Islamic movement, which was started by Mullah Omar, who was one of the old leaders of the Taliban government as well. That's what you have. You basically have a religious movement in Afghanistan, which is part of this Mujahideen after the Soviets fell, civil war, and then the warlords who are pissed at the Taliban, these are the ones at the US back in 2001. These guys were not good guys. A lot of these guys were massive drug dealers, they were people traffickers, they were arms dealers. These are basically, like as I said, warlords, criminals. These guys weren't bastions of freedom and democracy. They weren't Islamists, which is the one benefit. But the Northern Alliance, and there's Northern Alliance is still fighting in Afghanistan today, because I read, and I want to find this for you guys. There is a group of people under a warlord fighting back against the Taliban. But the Northern Alliance raped loads of women, treated people like shit, insanely corrupt as well, because if you give a bunch of money to warlords to form your secular Western government, it's probably not going to go very well. And that's what I say when we use like Western feminism as a cover for imperialism. Just see it for what it really is. Now I want to flick over to this article quick. So I wrote this article. It's taken some of my master's work, but I hope you guys can see this. So this group here, this is the Revolutionary Association of the Women of Afghanistan. Revolutionary Women's Movement in Afghanistan, right? Have you guys ever heard about this before? Well, they're protesting the Taliban during the Taliban rule. While the Bush administration, if you guys can see, this is what I wrote, and it's based on research. While the Bush administration briefly courted this group, they discarded them as they primarily asked for aid to help Afghans liberate themselves over a US intervention. While portraying the Afghan women as helpless, the Western media also didn't cover the US's own role in the Taliban's control of Afghanistan or the Northern Alliance's rape of women. Most Western feminist groups were silent on these issues. So this is why it's so frustrating to see just women's issues used so much to justify colonialism, right? And it's something that's been going on for a long, long time. Now, bear with me with this example, because I know people are going to get funny about it. But this is something people have to understand. So in India, in the 1700s, there was a long held, I don't know what part of India, maybe it's southern India, there was a practice called sati, and it was basically that when a husband died, in the funeral pyre, the wife was often put there, right? So the wife would be burned alive with the husband, right? This is something you also see in like Viking culture, for example. It's pretty brutal, pretty awful. So when the British went over there, they banned sati, right? It's outlawed. You can't do this anymore. And I was discussing this with someone once, and I think we came to like a similar agreement, right? Banning something like that is good. Like in a vacuum, that is good. Like a woman being burnt alive for a husband's funeral is bad, right? The same way, women being forced to wear hijab, niqab, burqa, that is a bad thing. And getting rid of that being mandatory is a good thing, right? The problem is that, like these women asked for in the example I'm giving you, this revolutionary movement in Afghanistan, they're saying, give us money so we can help ourselves. If you are an alien culture coming over to a place like Afghanistan and then making new laws and enforcing those laws, you're ruining the struggle for feminism equality, because you're making it seem to the locals this is like a Western imposition on you. And the way you're enforcing that is by killing these people as well. Like, obey our new laws that we've come over and imposed on you, or, basically face our justice. And that's the problem. That's what Western colonialists don't understand, even people with good intentions, is that these sorts of progressive movements have to come from the community themselves. It has to come from within. And yes, it might be quite a bloody struggle, it might be bad, but the only real progress you're going to make is if local people do this themselves. And it also plays into this Western white supremacist mindset, is that you think these people are not capable of doing it themselves. Like, you have to go in and make these laws and build this secular Western democracy for them, because that is this colonial mindset. And it's the same with the British. And like I said, in a vacuum, that's good, but we're not talking about a vacuum, because if you ask anyone, is sati bad? If you ask anyone, like in this country, if you polled about sati, I'm sure you'd get like high 90% of people saying that's bad. If you say about mandatory face coverings in the niqab or the burqa covering up your whole body, or the hijab, they'd probably say, a lot of people in the UK, for example, would say that is bad. But you just can't go over to other countries and enforce that. And for example, in America in the late 1800s, there was this feminist called, I think we learned about her in uni, she's called like Elizabeth Cady Stanton. And she basically wrote a whole book criticizing how the Bible was inherently sexist, right? That's pretty cool for someone in the 1800s. This woman was also a Republican who believed in the nuclear family and believed a woman's role was like primarily as, the caregiver in a family, right? And sometimes you just have to take what you can get, right? So she did good work exposing how the Bible was sexist. She wasn't a perfect feminist saying that women deserve total equality. And I think that's the same with how you have to view people in Afghanistan. So I have this organization up, right? This feminist organization probably doesn't have the complete same views as feminists in the West, but this is the vehicles you have to use to get that change because it's organic. They want women's rights. They might, they might not support, for example, sex work and stuff, but they want women to have equality in going to school and getting jobs. And you just have to take what you can get sometimes in these cultures, and you can't impose yourselves on these countries. So when I see women being constantly used now, being like, oh, think of the women, think of the women. If you were thinking of the women, then you wouldn't be giving massive amounts of arms to Islamists in the 1980s to fight a communist government in Afghanistan that was objectively better for women's rights. You wouldn't ignore organic feminist movements in the country and back massive warlord militias that rape women. This is stuff that like people need to understand. So yes, I feel terrible for the women who have now got more like equality in places like Kabul, for example. I feel terrible about that. But at the same time, this is, if the US is doing this for feminism, then the invasion was not justifiable in the first place. Because what you've now done, you've gone into this country, you've improved the lives of some women in like cities like Kabul. But now what's going to happen is the Taliban just going to come back. You've just taken them out for 20 years, and they're going to come back and do reprisals and enact, their awful old Islamist style government. And have you helped these women in the long term? Yes, you've helped some. You've helped people, them have a better life in the short term. But now what happens to them? And would your money have been better spent trying to fund these organizations and help them, get a better, spread their beliefs around Afghanistan? Because clearly, if a country can have a communist government, Afghanistan is it's not another planet. There are people in Afghanistan, before the Taliban, during the Taliban, who do want equality for women. It's not all basically really rural farmers and tribal people who have lived the same way for hundreds of years. There is clearly, at least in some part, an appetite for this stuff. But again, if the US cared about women's rights, why did they get rid of the communist government? Again, US doesn't give a shit about women's rights. US has never given a shit about women's rights. And this is essentially white supremacist colonialist mindset, which means you have to save the women from the Orient, save the women from this barbarism. Don't help them with that, give them their own agency. It's only you, the white man, who can come to these cultures and get rid of this horrible, practices and stuff. And like I said, it just doesn't take root in this stuff if it becomes an alien thing, because then it becomes politicized. And for the people who are always going to be against feminism, in that the Taliban, for example, then you just point to it, you're like, look at this Western degeneracy that they've brought over to our culture, and they're attacking our women, attacking our ways of life. And that's what it becomes. It becomes an attack from a completely different, the Americans, who are already seen as colonialists anyway to a lot of Muslim countries, and then it becomes a side like, are you with the Americans or are you with the Taliban who are fighting for Afghanistan's liberation? So please spare me about the feminist element of the Western invasion. It's just a joke, really. And like I said, I can emit in a vacuum banning people, like making laws so you don't have to wear the burqa and stuff, or the niqab or the hijab. That's all good in a vacuum. But you got to remember who's doing this. And the people who are enacting this are US stooges and the US created government. So it's not something that's done because it's been, a campaign from within the country and stuff. Anyway, that's a very frustrating element of all of this. So, yeah, it's just something people need to learn. It's not that Afghans are all okay. There's certain elements, right? So it's not like Afghans are all backwards and like horrible conservative misogynists. Like I said, this is a country that has histories of more secular governments. It's not all the Taliban, but the Taliban are a strong political movement in the area, Pakistan and Afghanistan. They're clearly one with a lot of support and a lot of willpower to fight for this long. But also the thing is as well, the Taliban only care about Afghanistan pretty much and parts of Pakistan. And these Talibans are not the same. They often, help each other, but they also have often fought each other as well because of their relationships at different times with the Pakistani intelligence service, and that they both help them at different times. So you've got to view it in that context. And for me as well, if the West cares so much about women's rights, then why are you best buddies with Saudi Arabia, which treat women objectively worse than many other countries, including countries that you put sanctions on? Like, Iran is not good for women's rights, all right? That's a fact. But Iran is better for women's rights than Saudi Arabia, right? What country gets depicted as monsters for treating women badly? Iran. What country doesn't really get put in this discussion in the circles of Western governments? Saudi Arabia. So again, if you care about women's rights and are trying to use women's rights as an excuse for your colonialism, at least be consistent. You literally fund a regime which is like the Taliban. It's even more powerful because, unlike the Taliban, it has state-of-the-art weaponry which you've given them as well. Kind of funny that you've also, seemingly given the Taliban this stuff because you've left it all behind. So it's just, very, very frustrating to see this stuff. And I want to get into some more tweets I wrote for people. So this is what I wrote in the article you guys read. So this is how this stuff was used in the run up to the invasion, because the burqa, the niqab, all this stuff. Like I said, I'm completely against the mandatory wearing of those things, but this is how they use them. So I wrote this for my masters. First Lady Laura Bush spoke in a radio address in November 2001 that fueled this discourse. She spoke of the malnourishment and poverty of Afghan women due to the oppression at the hands of the Taliban. Lumping the Taliban and Islamic terrorist groups together helped make the fight against female oppression seem more like a divide between the civilized people of the world and Islamic countries, not the US and the Taliban, which did not help to deter stereotypes about Islam in general. Laura Bush also helped perpetuate... you guys can't see this, one sec. There we go. Laura Bush also helped perpetuate the old language of Orientalism in saving women of colour from the barbaric practices of the East. After the invasion, Laura Bush said that Afghan women are no longer imprisoned in their homes and they can listen to music and teach their daughters without fear of reprisals by the Taliban. The media also helped frame the Bush administration's narrative. Pictures of Afghan women in burqas and niqabs appeared with reports of their subjugation on the covers of Time, Newsweek and the New York Times. After the invasion, the media ran stories on how the intervention had finally allowed women to not wear a burqa. The burqa became a symbol of oppression around the world, not just in Afghanistan. The power of the Bush administration and the US media helped frame the helplessness of Afghan women, but far less coverage was given to the women's rights movements within the country. The Revolutionary Association of the Women of Afghanistan had been constantly struggling for rights before the invasion. So I read you the next part of that where I talk about like this movement specifically. But again, this stuff was all used as propaganda to justify this invasion because, as we all know, the Taliban offered to hand over bin Laden. Bin Laden was the target, and just because he had somewhat friendly relations with Mullah Omar, because they had both fought the Soviets in Afghanistan and they both shared somewhat a political ideology in this Wahhabi style of Islam. Now, the thing that people need to remember now, and another tweet I had here, I probably can't find this one. I don't think I flicked it up. But basically, what we see in Afghanistan today is literally, don't even think about it as like the Taliban versus the US. Really, think about it as just an extension of this struggle that has been going on since the 1980s, right? So, everyone who fought the Soviet Union, there's a very diverse coalition, like Islamists, like people who would go on to form the Taliban, people who would then go on to join the Northern Alliance. See it as an extension of that conflict, as the Afghan civil war. These are all warlords vying for control. And Karzai's brother was a massive warlord. Karzai's deputy that he ran with in 2009. Karzai was the first president or prime minister of Afghanistan after the Taliban fell. He was also a warlord. So basically what this is just an extension of the civil war. And the Taliban are still fighting that. And of course, these warlords jump into the bed with the US, makes it very easy for propaganda for them to frame it as like this Western invasion. But it's something people need to remember is like these things don't just happen in like a vacuum, and you don't have to compare it to the Vietnam War essentially when you have like these like two warring nations like the North and the South. It's literally like loads of different factional warlords all fighting for control. And this has happened because of the power vacuum left after the Soviet-backed government fell in 1992. So, again, this chaos has been fueled by the West. And I wrote about Operation Cyclone. Operation Cyclone, started by Carter, originally was to give non-lethal aid to the Mujahideen. And they worked with China to spy on the Soviet war and stuff. But eventually what it descended into was Reagan giving them like Stinger missiles to shoot down Soviet helicopters. All right, so let's go on to the next thing. Okay, so here's another one I want to talk about. So because we studied in my history undergrad my final year, basically about how the US Army tried to reform itself, and people often think about like, how has the US basically lost another two wars? Okay, maybe technically didn't lose Iraq, but how have they done so poorly in another two wars? Did they not learn the lessons of Vietnam? And they didn't learn the lessons of Vietnam. So I tweeted this thread the other day. I'm just going to read through it. So how did the US lose to another guerrilla army in the Taliban? Just because I did it during my final year of my history undergrad, I thought I'd share why the US military never learned the lessons of being defeated by the NVA and the NLF in Vietnam. I'm focusing. Sorry, let's zoom in a bit more for you guys. Right, there we go. I'm focusing on the military angle here, but there are, of course, a million political reasons the West failed in its imperialist plans for what they wanted to create in Afghanistan. The US military went through a drastic change in the early 1970s as Nixon abandoned the draft for the war and reformed the military to make it more appealing as a career, more benefits, more individuality. But the US also assessed their approach to warfare. Despite being beaten by a guerrilla force in the NLF and a conventional army that often employed unconventional guerrilla tactics in the NVA, most of the top generals thought guerrilla warfare was a fad, so despite tailoring certain elements of the military to counterinsurgency, they made the military a one-size-fits-all style force. So they were trained in counterinsurgency, but also trained and equipped to fight conventional armies like the USSR. The military was expected to do both adequately, but it always focused more on conventional war. So basically, the role of the US military was never tailored to fight insurgents, despite losing to an insurgent-type style force in Vietnam, because they wanted an army that was flexible, where you could roll into somewhere like South Vietnam and nation build, but also fight the Soviets. So they never tailored the vehicles properly, they never tailored the tactics properly. There weren't significant elements of the army completely dedicated to counterinsurgency. I think the Marine Corps has more of a focus on counterinsurgency and some elements. I don't know if it's Delta Force and the Rangers, I think, as well, have more, like, they're more equipped to do counterinsurgency. But the US Army itself, like broadly as the infantry, have never been that good and well trained at counterinsurgency, because that involves a lot of diplomatic efforts in terms of like helping with the local staff, helping build, a relationship with locals who are willing to fight for you. The US Army broadly has not been trained to do that. By 1991, it seemed this approach had been vindicated. Grenada and Panama were quick and decisive victories. This culminated in the First Gulf War, where NATO, led by the US, easily destroyed the Iraqi army in a throwback conventional war, complete with massive tank battles. And I think it's the biggest tank battle since the Second World War was in the Gulf War between the Iraqis and the Americans and British. This vindicated the generals who had served in Vietnam, who believed that guerrilla warfare was a fad and they believed the US had regained its military might. There was no need to prioritise counterinsurgency to fight guerrillas over conducting conventional war. So the First Gulf War, obviously if you've seen images of it or watched movies about it, it's a massive conventional war. Iraq essentially has the fourth biggest military in the entire world. But what obviously happens is they're using old Soviet weaponry from the 70s against state-of-the-art modern military weaponry used by the United States and Great Britain and its various allies and stuff. So it's a massive success for the US, and it's basically them thinking. I think George Bush said after the war, we've banished the ghost of Vietnam, because that's what they thought. They thought, like, we have lost this war, this horrible drawn-out conflict, to a guerrilla army essentially. And now we've essentially destroyed the Iraqi army, no problem. Look how decisively we did this. The US is back. But this also made the generals way more complacent. Like, who needs a guerrilla army and who needs a counterinsurgent army? Like, why do we need to do this? Like, look how great we've done against Iraq. So when it came to Iraq, this is 2003, and Afghanistan, the same problems occurred that occurred in Vietnam, specifically because the US military never refocused their efforts to prioritise counterinsurgency. They, of course, destroyed the Iraqi army and the Taliban initially, but they were simply not prepared, equipped, or trained to win a long, drawn-out war against guerrillas, who often had support from large segments of the population, or at the very least, an unwillingness to help foreign invaders. And something people need to remember, this is something that pisses me off as well. I saw a comment on Reddit that was like, yeah, the Taliban hate this group because they're Shia and the Taliban are Sunni. That is not the way Islamic, I guess, things work. Like, Muslims don't automatically hate each other because one is Sunni and one is Shia. The same way Catholics and Protestants don't automatically hate each other. It's always based on like regional factors. For example, Iraq has been more of a melting pot of this stuff, and of course, like a lot of the conflict in Iraq has been between like Sunni and Shia groups. At the moment, their government is made up of like broad segments of different religions. Their parliament has like Sunni, Shia, Christians, everything like that. But in terms of this stuff, anyway, with the Iraqi insurgents, a lot of Shia insurgents were fighting the United States because they wanted them out of the country, even though the United States had backed Shia exiles to come in and become the new government of Iraq, which would become controlled by Shia Muslims, as opposed to the Sunnis who had made up the old Iraqi government, including Saddam Hussein. But that is something like that happened in Iraq. It was a broad coalition of guerrillas. And I actually spoke. Okay, I'm not going to reveal this actually. Basically, I've spoke to someone who is making some sort of entertainment which is about Iraq, and I said to them, I hope you don't just include Al Qaeda guerrillas in your project, because I feel like focusing solely on Al Qaeda can help rehabilitate the causes of the war to people, because especially in the initial stages, the guerrilla fighting done by Iraqis was not just done by fanatics. Al Qaeda moved into the vacuum afterwards, but it had like obviously ex-Saddam Hussein military people, generals who hated Al Qaeda because they're Arab socialists. Then you had Sunnis and Shia militias not related to the government at all fighting the US. So I said to him, if you're going to put it as Al Qaeda, you might start rehabilitating the war, because although people might say the Iraq war was bad, you're still fighting the people who did 9/11 essentially. Now, I go on to say, Iraq and Afghan are very, very different in terms of ethnic makeup, geography, geopolitical alliances, but guerrilla warfare was just something the US couldn't handle. They left Iraq in 2011 without defeating the elements that make up the ISIS blitzkrieg in 2014, and obviously what we're seeing now is 20 years of fighting the Taliban having virtually no effect on their own capacity to wage war or take over territory. So that's my general thing on the military aspects of Afghanistan. But yeah, the US military, never reorganized. It never changed its tactics significantly. And because of the Gulf War, they thought, well, that's it now. That's how war's going to be fought. And what we've seen is like a shift the other way, where it's really hard to imagine the US really engaging in a massive conventional war, because it has political factors and it also has like geopolitical factors in terms of who you're going to be pissing off by completely destroying another army like this. So it is like, very, I guess, hard for people to understand a lot of this stuff. But yeah, the US basically never learned the lesson of Vietnam. So it's not surprising these guerrilla movements in Afghan and Iraq have essentially used it as a model to defeat them. So I want to read this on my own time because I haven't read this. It's a deal between Trump and the Taliban, which I haven't looked through. So here's just a dumb take I saw on Twitter. I'll flick this up on the screen as well. So Adam Housley, I don't know who the hell this guy is, just saw a dumb tweet and I replied, imagine if in World War II we had captured Nazi, Italian, Japanese generals and leaders, held them, then released them back into their respective countries once the rebuilding began. Sounds dumb, doesn't it? Well, we did that in Afghanistan, and now he is running the slaughter. I talk about the Taliban people they released under Trump, and I said, Adam, I hate to be the one to tell you, but the Allies very specifically did this, and even worse, actually ensured some of the worst Axis war criminals were put in post-war militaries and governments. Yeah, so basically, pretty much everyone who was complicit in the Holocaust, Greek collaborators with the Nazis were put in the government after the war, Japanese war criminals were put in the government after the war, German war criminals are put in the military and the government of West Germany. Obviously, a lot of them snatched up for things like NATO or NASA and stuff as well. I'm just gonna have a quick look. So this whole article I wrote it's an extension of an essay I wrote for my master's. It's just all about Orientalism and the war on terror. I read you the part that was very specific to Afghanistan. Is there anything else really here? It's basically talking about films, more or less, in terms of like how films help rehabilitate stuff. I actually sent this to the guy who's making an Iraq War project, telling him, give us a read if you want to avoid some of the mistakes things like American Sniper or The Hurt Locker make. But yeah, that is my long ranty section of the video. So I haven't been reading the comments, but I will start reading them in a sec. Let me just change some stuff around. Alright, let's get your comments up again. Give me a sec. Alright. Full view. Oh, a lot of comments. Taliban is doomed. Fabio says, I don't think so. Sorry, I'm just reading the comments. Can you talk about the heroin? Am I on demon time? Yeah, Blake, I'm literally buzzing on demon time right now. The heroin stuff, I don't know too much about to talk about in detail. I do know that the US, I believe, stopped them growing cotton instead because it would interfere with the US market on the world, in the world stage, basically selling their own cotton. Sorry, reading some more things. Fourth biggest, poorly trained, equipped, and led army. Yeah, it was the Iraqi army was crap. Yeah, Iraq's a fucking mess, obviously, at the moment, with like the legalized Shia militias how embedded it is with Iran. Like, it's just one of those situations like Northern Ireland. Like, I'm not saying it is simple. Like I was saying, it's complex, but in there's a lot of like obviously like revenge killings and stuff. It is a shitty situation. Um, do you think stumbling block for America was not sanctioning Pakistan, as Pakistan is the primary sponsor of the Taliban? I'd say like the reasons for sort of keeping Pakistan on side is more like probably like geopolitical considerations of China. But now Pakistan is more friendly with China and buys a lot of weapons from them, whereas India buys its weapons from the Americans and Russians. Um, but I think with the Taliban, the thing, like, the main thing with the US lost is because the thing is, I don't even think it matters too much about the Taliban's own capabilities. It's more about nation building in that country, and the people you're choosing to lead the nation building. Like we saw, the president apparently fled to the UAE with bags with like $160 million in them. And the problem is, the people the US trusted to build this country were completely untrustworthy and corrupt. And it's something that happens in a lot of these puppet regimes is the people they pick are just these stooge strongmen who don't have a lot of support in the country or don't have a lot of loyalty within their own ranks. It's just people who would do what the US says. And that's pretty much, the case with this stuff. Blake saying, perfect time to replay Phantom Pain. Yeah. Why was the Taliban successful and not ISIS? The Taliban's more successful, first of all, because it's better organized. I'd say is one part. The terrain in Afghanistan, I think, suits them a lot better as people who know like the land a lot better. Where Iraq isn't the same as Afghanistan in terms of like, but how mountainous it is one part. ISIS was very like what's the word? I wouldn't say ISIS were guerrilla fighters as much as the Taliban are. ISIS was more conventional a lot of the time, trying to fight in massive cities. And let's remember, the Taliban in taking over the country, they haven't had to fight much. ISIS really fought a lot, and they fought, obviously the Kurds, and they fought in Syria as well, and they fought in Iraq. And part of the reason they did so well is because the Iraqi army was pretty fickle as well, and they're heavily motivated. ISIS, especially the 2014 incarnation, which was led by former Saddam officials and stuff. It wasn't just led by Bin Laden a million miles away, as people who had expertise in warfare and stuff. So also, but the thing with Iraq as well is it's more fragmented. Like I was talking about, Sunni Shia split is not something you can really talk about because there were Sunni militias who fought for the US occupation against Al Qaeda or other Sunni militias. I think there's one called Sons of Iraq, who were, I think they were former Iraqi army, and the US said, if you fight for us, we'll give you jobs afterwards. And then, of course, the US screwed them over as well. So I think Iraq's just a bit more of a sectarian melting pot, where although Afghanistan is very diverse in itself, I think the other groups, I think in Iraq a bit more than Afghanistan, a lot of the militias and stuff are more like hostile, where I think Afghanistan is more about like tribes and warlords rather than like some sort of sectarian affiliation. Of course, the Taliban are Sunni Muslims and stuff. But I think it's just a completely different context, really. And I also think because of Iraq's oil, there's a lot more international focus on that sort of conflict, where a lot of regional powers are really flooding the area with arms as well. Like either they're funding ISIS or they're funding the Iraqi government, or they're backing the Iraqi government, like the US do. So I think it's more like a built-up area in terms of like as US bases, US personnel, US interests, and it's just been like a more developed urban society, whereas Afghanistan is far more rural. So it leaves it, I don't know, you can't control it as easily, and the hubs of control like Kabul, which stayed like fair in Western control a lot of the time, apart from various bombings and stuff. You don't have that as much in Afghanistan, whereas Iraq has many cities, far more urbanized, far more developed generally as a country. So I'd say it's a bit more like a group like ISIS has to fight in cities a lot, whereas a group like the Taliban get to fight more on their in rural areas, which suits them a lot better, to be honest. So I'm just reading some stuff. Someone talking about Afghan ISIS, which I hate the Taliban. Do you think the way the Afghan exit played out will create a lot more terrorism? I mean, like, what do you mean specifically? Do you mean like terrorism in Afghanistan among warring factions, or do you mean like Al Qaeda? I don't know, attacking the West or something, like blowing up Western cities or something. So I'm just this is some music. I readily just talking about the Nazis that joined literally every Western aligned organization. Any book recommendations about the topic? Yeah, I hate people asking me this because I never have good ones about Afghanistan. I'm sorry, I don't have a good book recommendation for you. It's the problem sometimes when you do this stuff at uni. You read a bunch of books and articles and make loads of notes, but you don't read the whole book, and then just the name of it doesn't really stick in your head. Really annoyingly, my iPad wiped all my old documents as well from my history undergrad, so I don't have any of them anymore. Do you think the US is thinking about invading Iran? No, especially with Biden as president. No way. Yeah, Black Brit. Most of my history stuff has just been wiped. So I have my master's stuff on my Google Drive, but I didn't do Afghanistan as much for my master's. I did more like Gulf War and Arab Spring. So someone's saying the conflict will spill over. I mean, we'll see. I'm not. I'm because of the relative lack of fighting. I'm not sure if that will like light a fire with like the Pakistani Taliban and stuff. We'll see. Obviously, you don't know what's going on behind the scenes. Pakistani Taliban and Afghan Taliban, I don't believe are on the best of terms right now. So I'm not sure if what happens with if Pakistan back obviously the Taliban government. Don't know if they'd work together to fight the Pakistani Taliban. Yeah, I was actually talking with someone who is a British Army veteran and it was a contractor in Afghanistan. And they only left like 2 weeks ago. They left Kabul and stuff. But they said the feeling kind of was that Russia and China were going to try and cut deals with the Taliban, especially China. And that really wouldn't surprise me. And I was also saying to him, I was like, for me, if the Taliban, say the Taliban secure Afghanistan, they become the new government, the thing is, I think the best thing would be to not put sanctions on them because Afghanistan is extremely poor, just like with many poor countries. If you put sanctions on them, the people who are going to suffer are just the average person. It's not going to be the Taliban government. And also that pushes them, if from a strategic point of view, that pushes them way into the hands of the Chinese and the Russians. So geopolitically, probably not the best move in terms of like human rights as well. Not the best move, but Russia and China obviously don't really give a shit about dealing with countries that the US won't deal with. Both, obviously have big ties to North Korea and Iran. So I could totally see it. Yeah, Blake, I can't see the Taliban control increasing terrorism against the West. It seems like it'd be a good thing. The US should never step foot in another country again. Yeah, well, I agree. Like in terms of like colonialism is just shitty anyway, and I do see Afghanistan as just colonialism. If people like to sanitize it, but that's what it is. So just. All right, see you later, Red Leader. Yeah, Harry, I agree. Well, in the 1990s, there was massive sanctions on Iraq. It killed like 400,000 people, estimated through the poverty. Obviously, the army was fine, so was Saddam. So, yeah, I don't think it's a good idea. But the thing is, like, all right, in the chat, who is the leftist who's had the worst take on Afghanistan? I want to hear it. And for me, like, I don't understand anyone who thinks it should have the occupation should have stayed. Like, I get it's shitty the people who are suffering right now, but I also blame the West for creating that situation and at the start. Like, what do you think was going to happen? Do you honestly think you're going to create some great secular state in Afghanistan, which would be totally sustainable forever? And everyone would love and accept while you're imposing your own morals and stuff on this country? Because it's like, I don't understand why people think continued occupation is a good thing. And for me, like, if the Taliban are going to take over, just like other groups, you need to like normalize relations with countries like this. And as much as you don't like it, you need to welcome them into the global community if you want them to change at all. Like, Afghanistan won't become better until it becomes richer and its people get out of poverty more. And then if you want people to stop supporting the Taliban, then you've got to like improve their conditions and stuff. Like, I don't understand how you don't see it's related in that this poverty, poor education, the Western colonialism creates support for the Taliban. And yeah, the Taliban often do act like this mob gang, but you can't take over a country that size pretty easily without having some sort of support. So I asked who had the worst takes. So Zanderhall, yeah, probably not surprising. Is it Vosh? I haven't seen his take. I have the worst take. So what is your take then? The media, yep. I saw that guy who was saying to like Joe Biden's defense secretary, I don't know who it was, about like, do you want to put like bases in Tajikistan or some shit? The fact that we spent $2 trillion to replace the Taliban with the Taliban, we apparently can't afford to provide healthcare to everyone, generally makes me hate my country. Yeah, that's a good point for sure. Just the amount of money that has been wasted. Zanderhall is a shit take. I haven't heard many people actually defend this occupation, especially not other leftists. Harry says, Rory Stewart made some good points about staying on question time, but he admitted it was wrong getting involved in the first place. For me, I just don't see... The only thing I would criticise is, and this is something that's just generally, you can criticise Britain and the UK for, is if well, it shows because you obviously have multiple governments, but there should have been a way easier way for Afghans who'd help the West to get out of the country. Like, that is just something, the thing is, I don't feel... It's like with Vietnam to an extent. Obviously, a lot of the people who jumped in bed with the US and Vietnam were fucking just awful, traitors to like Vietnam's own people. But in the context of like so many just average people joined up with the West there. And the thing is, in Vietnam, the belief in mass executions and everything, that was way overblown by the West, and a lot of that didn't come to pass. But with Afghanistan, you have a group that are more fanatical, more religious, more hardline, who probably will kill more people. So surely that should have been obvious to someone that you've got to get the people who helped you out quicker. And these people often promised, probably promised some easier route into America if they helped out. Yeah, AL, that is a bad take. Because do you not think the US tried to kill the Taliban high leadership? They couldn't even kill Mullah Omar, and he was one guy. Mullah Omar just died of old age or something, or like some disease. He was the leader of the Taliban for like decades. So no, I don't think that's a good idea at all. Thanks for the donation, Blake. Appreciate the $4.99. Do I think Trump would have pulled out had he been re-elected? Seems like at this point Afghanistan was a hot potato, each president through to the next. The thing about Trump is that he was such a little like wuss and so spineless. I could totally see him not doing it, despite making plans to. Like, surely there'd be some corrupt person in his regime that would probably have some new investment or business ties, and then they just stay there for money, essentially. I could totally see Trump going back on that. Actually, credit to Joe Biden for actually fucking doing it, is what I can say. Is like, it just had to be done. You can't just stay there forever. And like I said, this government was never ever going to work. This warlord government was never going to work. Extremely corrupt. People didn't like it because it was too corrupt, bureaucratic, all that other crap. I was watching Taliban taking over some local towns, and they're interviewing some people. Of course, maybe they're not being honest. That's always something you've got to take into account. But some people were saying, like, the government were just crap. Like, the law was crap. No one got punished for anything. And at least the Taliban do something. That's what one of them said. And obviously, I'm not saying that's a better alternative, but you can see why people might be frustrated when you're ruled by a bunch of corrupt warlords who probably don't really care about your life at all. Yeah, I don't know why I don't think the Indians are going to do much different compared to the US, which is like one of the most like wealthy militaries in human history, and they can't even kill the Taliban leadership. Alright, read some more stuff. Your take is bad. It's just bad because it's unrealistic, I think. And why are you relying on the Indians? Like, I don't understand. What makes the Indians so special to do this when the US couldn't do it? Future Sound did a great video. Yeah, I haven't watched any of their Metal Gear videos, despite me subscribing to them and seeing it pop up all the time. Yeah, it's pretty crazy to see the Taliban like take all these helicopters and stuff, like just leaving all that equipment. What amazes me about the whole thing is that the US seems so oblivious to how poor and how corrupt the Afghan army was. Like, it didn't even try to resist, despite having all this equipment provided for them. It's just crazy that, in my mind, they didn't know they wouldn't fight for them. Ropto, I don't know if the Taliban have changed at all. Maybe they've tried being more realistic to avoid getting cut off again. But who knows? Who knows who's going to recognise the Taliban government? I think only two or three countries recognised them in the 90s as the legit government. So who knows what's going to happen? So How does the Taliban even know how to operate a helicopter? I'm sure they have some pilots who maybe have trained overseas, like people talking about the links to Pakistan. Also, maybe they have access to like flight simulators on their computers or something. Not that you know. AL, your takes make no sense. In India, Russia, China, these countries don't get on a lot. Like China and India really don't like each other at the moment, and Russia sells weapons to India. Um, yeah, that is true. Troop 64. They didn't just want to pull out, but it does amaze me. Like the South Vietnamese army did get better because they did something called Vietnamization, where they stopped deploying U.S. ground troops as much and mainly used the South Vietnamese and the South Koreans in the early 70s to fight the North Vietnamese in NLF, while the US would do the Air Force. But it seems to be a bit different with Afghanistan. But the thing is, for me, it's not like about the soldiers necessarily being poorly trained. I'm sure like a lot of there's certain elements in the Afghan army that probably were pretty well trained and pretty effective, but it's just the leadership really. It's like corruption, and yeah, like I was talking about, like warlords who are self-interested. They got no loyalty to an Afghanistan nation that was created by the West essentially. They just care about themselves and their own territory. Taliban got some free 80s so they can play Flight Simulator. They might possibly have some good computers to play some flight simulators. Yeah, they won't. Apparently, I read somewhere that the Taliban actually paid a lot of them to surrender because they hadn't been paid in so long. So that probably tells you a lot. Afghan army was actually scammed by the American government. Korea is a homogenous nation. Why are we talking about Korea? The equipment for Afghanistan is even more shit. As before, they had tanks, jets, Hind gunships. They did have the Taliban actually captured some Hinds that were given to them by India. If you're talking about India earlier. How motivated is the average Afghan soldier? Yeah, probably not very motivated, especially when the US have gone. But yeah, the thing is, it obviously it's a really shit thing all round. Like I do obviously feel really bad for just the average people who are gonna live under Taliban rule, and lives of people probably did get better in places like Kabul, for example. But for a lot of people, it often is weird thinking about this through a very Western lens. Obviously, a lot of people in Afghanistan aren't all poorly educated or backwards, or how we describe people as backwards and stuff like that. But for a lot of people in a country that's very rural and poor, it doesn't really matter who's in charge for a lot of them in terms of their daily life is not affected so much by a centralized bureaucracy running out of Kabul. And I'm sure there are lots of parts of Afghanistan, I think they pretty much are, that have always been controlled by the Taliban, even during the government's rule and stuff. And it's just something to view it in as that it's crap for these people, but at the same time, the alternative that was given to them just wasn't something that could ever last long enough. And like I said, it's just an extension of the 1990 Civil War. It's just the same people fighting each other. And, the Taliban were never going away. And if the Afghanistan army and this new Afghanistan nation can't exist on its own, then what, you're just meant to indefinitely fund it forever while it slowly collapses while you're there? I don't know. Um, um, do you ever think there will be peace and stability in Afghanistan, even though it will be ruled by a draconian theocratic dictatorship? Um, yeah, honestly, I don't know. Like, Afghanistan's a hard one because of the war. Just so many new like factions have been galvanized. It's kind of like Iraq in the sense that there's just so many different militias now with different allegiances in the country. So I can't see like stability in terms of like, okay, I don't think it'll be like open war, but it'll be much like before in terms of like there's just not a lot of peace for people. So yeah, I feel bad for a lot, but that's the thing, you know. Afghanistan is what we care about at the moment because it's very much in the media focus. But there's so much like horrible dictatorships backed by whatever country, mainly the US, that you just can't rescue all these people. You can't help them all. And like I said, a lot of the time, countries have to struggle from their own freedom from within, because when you get a foreign country imposing something by force on a people, it's just not going to stick very well. You know, I think about Ireland, for example, obviously, like where my family are from. Like, Ireland did it on its own in the end. Yeah, it had help from the United States. You know, a lot of weapons were given to the IRA by the United States, but it's still, you know, the United States didn't go to Ireland and try and create an Irish state. Do you know what I mean? Like a Republican Irish state or a Catholic Irish state. And it's the same with the Northern Ireland government at the moment. It's to a lot of Republicans and Catholics, it's just seen as something that was created by the British and it doesn't have legitimacy. And one day, you know, in my mind, next 20 years, it's going to go away. And the thing is, just like you see with the Irish Republicans and stuff, it has to be something that at least feels organic to people and relatable to people, even if you do have outside assistance. Like, the IRA have always had strong assistance from the United States. So that's what I think. Like, you've got to offer, but then it shows. Like, for example, in Iraq, after the Gulf War, there was a massive uprising by Shia militias against Saddam Hussein, and the US promised them if they did it, they would back them up, and then the US didn't back them up. They implemented like a no-fly zone, but it only included like shooting down Saddam's planes and not his choppers. So we just used the choppers to like completely destroy them. So it's the US is always using things like that as political pawns, and that's pretty much it. So yeah, change needs to happen from within, and like in terms of like just the flow of history, it can be quite hard sometimes because you think you can go there and make a difference, but like here's an example for people, right? All right, so the US. Okay, let's flip the countries around. Let's pretend the UK is in the US, like the whole of the landmass of the US is actually the UK, and the US is just on the British Isles, right? And then say Britain looks at the US and says, well, that's a backwards country right there. Look at that insane police brutality. Look at the lack of universal healthcare. We should go over there and give them that healthcare, right? So objectively, universal healthcare is a good and moral thing, right? So what UK invades, overthrows the US government and implements a new system, which includes, universal healthcare. And do you think all Americans are going to accept that? And why won't they? And let's say even if most Americans, which I think they do, broadly support universal healthcare, but what happens, like with Afghanistan, is because you're doing it as a foreign country, and that's just something that's always going to piss people off, even if your cause even if your cause is 100% like moral and just, it doesn't fucking matter. And that's something Western countries just need to learn. And I hope, you know, Afghanistan is the final lesson for this, in terms of you can't just go around the world. And this was, and what frustrates me, this was the plan of the neocons in the Bush administration, is that they'd invade Iraq, Afghanistan, Iran, North Korea, and Syria. I'm not joking, and Libya. I'm not joking. They actually wanted to invade all those countries, topple the governments, and set up Western stooge governments. And like that's like this neocon mindset. Why it's, you know, a bit different than neoliberal, in my opinion, is neocons want to do all this stuff through force, is overturn these governments, put in a Western stooge, bring democracy and American values to these countries. And that's something that is good and right and should be done. Where in my mind, neoliberalism more seeks to do this through economic means, like IMF or some shit like that. But, you know, hopefully that is such a doomed project from the start. To think there were people in the US government who thought you could overthrow multiple countries' governments and install Western stooges and somehow that makes the world a better place is just insane. But that's like the Western chauvinism that is just in general, you know, general Western culture, is that, you know, this superior culture as we see it has to be exported around the world by force, as neocons did. Katie, thanks so much for the $10. Really, really appreciate that. The best way to help in situations like this, and also what's going on in Haiti, is to focus on mutual aid and local groups. Let local people figure out their local issues, at least in my opinion. Yeah, I totally totally agree with that. And you know, there are certain instances in history where I support international support, but it's more about like on the individual, like organizing themselves. So the Spanish Civil War is a great example, right? The Spanish Civil War is a civil war, but it doesn't have the British or the Irish government or the American government going in with troops to take a side of that conflict. The socialist side is a massive coalition of loads of internationalists, communist groups and socialist groups from like Cuba or from Ireland or from the UK, from France and places like this. And of course, you know, Nazi Germany backed Franco and helped Franco. But like that's a good example for me, is that like you're going over there as like an individual to help with this change in this country, and you're helping these people fight against fascism and fighting against potential oppression which did come with the Franco government. And I think that's totally fine, right? Like I don't even mind you know, on an individual level I don't mind, even though most of these people are lunatics, people who go over to fight with the Kurds against ISIS. I don't have much of a problem with that. Go do that if you want. If you feel that strongly about it as an individual, I feel like that's fine. A lot of them did actually end up joining, like, you know, I think a couple of them ended up joining the PKK, which obviously doesn't fly with the UK because we consider them a terrorist group like Turkey does. But yeah, that's totally fine. But yeah, like you should help locals help themselves, not lobby governments to go in and overthrow other governments. Hi Homeless, I'm finishing up now, so sorry I didn't get here earlier. This will be on the Kavernacle Extra though. Yeah, Harry's saying the irony of America going around the world policing and enforcing democracy when only 7 months ago there was an attempted violent coup in their own capital. Yeah, fucking exactly. Also, American democracy is literally like an authoritarian oligarchy anyway, and America in large part has many elements of the police state. You know, one thing I want to say about American police, like American police are some of the most mask-off fascists I've ever seen. Like, you know, I consider most police fascists, but like they're some of the most mask-off fascists. That they're so proud of it and they're so happy to like carry out violence. And if anyone knows the history of like authoritarianism, it's the police who are the main soldiers of authoritarian regimes. It's not the military, it's the police. Yeah, George Orwell was in the Spanish Civil War. Who else was in the Spanish Civil War who's really famous? Someone really famous. I can't really think of it right now. But yeah, like if anything, I'll say in closing, it's just like, you know, the thing of Afghanistan, it's just like I said, it's just sad because it's such a short term solution. Like I'm saying, the progress relatively made in places like Kabul about women's rights and just like more secular government and stuff, like that's all a good thing. And in a vacuum, that's a good thing. But now, what have you done? Like, what's going to happen now? Let's hope, if there's anything that comes out that's good about this whole conflict, is that the Taliban government that's going to come in, hopefully, will be more lenient and tolerant. I'm not hopeful. I'm okay. I'm not. I'm hopeful what's going to happen. I'm not expecting that to happen at all. But let's hope that in a more internationalist world, like the world is very different from 2001, right? China was not a superpower in 2001, and I'm hoping this more globalized society the Taliban now have to join, I'm hoping that has some sort of influence. And I'm hoping, you know, Afghanistan for the future, you know, does not resemble Afghanistan of the past. I'm hoping there is some sort of, you know, progress. I'm hoping the Taliban aren't as fanatical as they were if they're going to control this country. This is really wishful thinking, but I'm hoping the 21st century like progression we've made, just in general everything, I'm hoping that influences them to be a bit more like modern, and if that happens, like maybe that'll be a somewhat positive effect of them being overthrown. But at the same time, you've got to imagine, what would Afghanistan look like today if there wasn't an occupation? Would people have cast off the Taliban themselves, like had enough of their rule? Would the Taliban have evolved themselves? Like, would they have stopped being such, like, you know, fanatical hardline Islamists and stuff? You know, you just can't predict these things and predict how things will go. So, you know, we'll see what happens in the future. But like at the moment, just the West need to do more. You know, about the refugee crisis, and sadly, I don't think they're going to do too much about it. So that just sucks for all the poor Afghan people who join the military, probably for a better life. The West maybe promised them the potential of going to the United States one day, and yeah, a lot of them are going to be killed now, which fucking sucks. And yeah, but the thing is, just don't let this trick anyone into telling you that an increased and a further occupation of Afghanistan for the foreseeable future is like a good thing, because it's not a good thing. It makes the situation worse. It makes it more polarized. It helps spread sectarianism. And you know, from a nationalist point of view, for a lot of the right wing in America who suddenly are calling this a disaster, you're wasting American money and American lives for nothing, essentially. Like, I saw a British soldier saying, like, you know, it was all for nothing, essentially. I've lost my legs for nothing, my friends died for nothing, and I finally realise that now. And not that that wasn't obvious at the time, but I guess for a lot of people, they believe themselves they're doing something good. So yeah, like I'm hoping it's not as bad as the 90s, but possibly could be. But yeah, I guess I'll end it all there. So I've been dying to say a lot of this stuff for a while, just because sometimes just reading hot takes on Twitter and YouTube from people. The thing is, here's something I will say. I think a lot of left wing people, you know what I was saying about the feminism angle? I think a lot of prominent left wing streamers who like to talk about Afghanistan really miss that out of its analysis. Like, I think a lot of people need to be a bit, I don't know if just growing up in the United States is brainwashes you so much you can't see this for what it is. But yes, justifying imperialism through feminism is just fucking gross, and it's also very counterproductive, which I think people need to like really understand. Like, short-term gains made by Western colonialists for local women in the long term isn't a good thing, because especially with something like Afghanistan, the people who enacted this women's oppression are coming back, and you know, it makes the whole issue on feminism a West versus like local Afghan issue, which is annoying. And also, like I said before, if the West really cared about women's rights, why did they give these people who'd become the Taliban so much money and weapons? Why didn't they let the Soviets and the Soviet-backed government remain? Because the women had better rights then. Like, that's just one thing. Yeah. Okay, so I think that's everything for tonight. If you want to catch up with this, the Kavernacle Extra is where I post my live stream archives. Hopefully, I'm going to have a look at the streaming. I want to make the quality better because, like you guys are saying, it's been pretty shit lately. But yeah, that is everything for tonight. Appreciate you guys tuning in. Sorry if I didn't read the chat as much as I normally do. I might make my video tomorrow about Afghanistan as well, so stay tuned for that. And check out my Lauren Southern video if you haven't already. And yeah, that's pretty much it for tonight. See you guys in the next stream. What day is it today? Yeah, I don't know what day it is, but it's Thursday morning. I might stream again, but I'm busy this week and I got out 2 videos, so let's see. Anyway, it's Wednesday. Thanks, Katie. Thanks as usual for the people who joined. Good chat and everything. And yeah, want to catch up with this Kavernacle Extra? Check it out probably tomorrow, I'd say. Anyway, thank you everyone for the good stream.